What is going on, everybody, and welcome to Celtics Talk Weekly Live. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and today we're going to be covering. Wait, we gotta turn the audio. Hello, everybody, and welcome to CTW Live. I'm your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and today we're going to be covering the big Kevin Durant trade, in which just went down, along with previewing the NBA Finals, Game 7 of the 2025 NBA Finals. So thank you all for joining me here today. However, let's get into the news. And the big news coming out this morning, the Phoenix Suns are trading away two-time NBA Finals MVP Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 pick in the 2025 NBA draft, just a couple days away, and 5 future second-round picks. Sources tell ESPN, and that's coming from Shams Charania. Here we have our next tweet from Shams Charania here. Blockbuster trade on the final day of the NBA season with Game 7 of the NBA Finals lingering. The Suns engaged in deep conversations with the two Durant finalists, Houston and Miami, over the last 24 hours and reached agreement on the deal Sunday morning. Must note within this as well, San Antonio was very much in on Kevin Durant. However, the final two suitors, it came down to Houston and Miami. And of course, we see Kevin Durant now in Houston, not with James Harden and Russell Westbrook. However, Kevin Durant now completes the trio of Harden, Westbrook, and Durant playing for a franchise yet again. Not at the same time, but as you see here, Durant now joining the Houston Rockets via trade from the Phoenix Suns, former team of James Harden and Russell Westbrook. And some other news in regard to the Houston Rockets here coming out this past week. The Houston Rockets head coach Ime Udoka, former Celtics head coach who took the Celtics to the finals in 2022, has agreed upon a long-term deal with the Houston Rockets. And this reads right here: Houston Rockets head coach Ime Udoka has agreed to a long-term contract extension with the franchise that makes him one of the highest paid NBA coaches after a 52-win season and top 2 seed for the first time in 7 years, sources tell ESPN. So a little bit more news coming out from Houston this week, not only with Kevin Durant, but also Steven Adams. Just in, the Houston Rockets center Steven Adams has agreed to a 3-year, $39 million contract extension to stay with the franchise, sources tell ESPN. After playing a key rotation and leadership role in the Rockets' playoff run, the new deal keeps a top center out of free agency. So Houston retaining Steven Adams on the roster. However, we all know the big news story here is Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant traded to the Houston Rockets from the Phoenix Suns. And let's get into this from the Rockets' perspective first. We're going to look at the Rockets' perspective, but we're also going to look at the Suns as well. First, let's get into this from a Rockets' perspective because they're the big winners in this huge deal here for Kevin Durant. And let's also mention this trade cannot be finalized until July 6th, 2025, because of Jalen Green's poison pill restriction. Now, with that being said, this deal now owns the potential to turn into a bigger deal with more teams involved. I would certainly see an extension on the deal later on down the line in the offseason, potentially past the draft, right before free agency, and even into free agency. So this deal not yet finalized for Kevin Durant, for Houston and Phoenix. This deal cannot be finalized until July 6th. So certainly a lot of potential for this deal to expand and become a little bit bigger. And that's typically what we see with these type of deals that cannot be finalized right away. There's definitely more room here there's definitely more room to expand onto this deal and make it a little bit bigger for all these teams. However, Kevin Durant, he was rumored to want San Antonio, Houston, or Miami, as we already mentioned in there with that Shams tweet. However, he was finally sent to Houston after Phoenix engaged heavily, as we read, with the Rockets and Miami Heat. However, Kevin Durant finally ends up in Houston. And for Houston, looking at the package of this deal, Houston didn't really give up too much for Kevin Durant. And to start it off, first off, the Houston Rockets needed a player like Kevin Durant. A glaring hole in Houston's rotation during the first round versus Golden State was a lack of a crunch time bucket getter. the Houston Rockets need a certified bucket getter, somebody who's going to be there down the stretch, somebody who people know, or not even people, but the coaching staff and the rest of the team knows, the franchise knows, who's going to be in that main role as a scorer and playmaker down the stretch of games, the main bucket getter, the main facilitator. No one ever really knew who was supposed to be Houston's focal point on offense down the stretch of games in big games this past season. Was it supposed to be Şengün? Was it supposed to be Jalen Green? Dylan Brooks took a shot at it at times, and just Houston's entire roster, they didn't have a certified bucket getter, despite being a deep roster, despite presenting a fairly deep roster compared to the rest of the league. Houston just didn't have the certified stars, the certified bucket getters to go far in this year's playoffs, or last year's playoffs, rather, this year's 2025 year. But KD gives the Rockets that certified bucket getter, that certified star, that known entity down the stretch of games. So Kevin Durant, he comes into Houston now, $54 million deal, only 1 year left on his deal, but fills a role for the Rockets on the basketball floor, fills a definitive role for the Houston Rockets on the basketball floor that they needed last season, and they knew they were going to need going into next season unless one of their young guys stepped up into that role. However, none of the Houston young guys necessarily, it didn't look imminent that any of those guys were actually going to step up and become that star player. And if so, it would be multiple years away, not next year, when the Houston Rockets inevitably now will be looking to make a pretty deep playoff run. However, let's get into the package of this deal from Houston's perspective. Houston didn't give up much in this deal at all, from my perspective. If I'm Houston, I believe I just robbed the Phoenix Suns. That's what I think. If I'm a Houston Rockets fan, if I'm the Houston Rockets front office, I believe just we just absolutely robbed the Phoenix Suns. Because let's break down this package. First off, you have Dylan Brooks, and Dylan Brooks, his salary, if you look at his salary and what the Houston Rockets, they signed him 2 seasons ago. If you look at Dylan Brooks's salary, he was always a player Houston was going to look at to potentially move for a more efficient player later on down the line. Made $22.3 million last year. His contract's actually descending right now, which is a rarity in the NBA and something that teams definitely want to hold on to. But Dylan Brooks, $22.3 million last year. However, going into the future, he's 21.1 next year in 25-26. And then in 26-27, he's 19.9, basically $20 million in 26-27. This was always a deal to me when it was signed that could be moved for another name later on down the line, a more efficient name. Maybe it's packaged. Dylan Brooks's contract is packaged into a deal with multiple names, as we're seeing today, at least one other name, to go out and get an upgraded player over Dylan Brooks, or an upgrade to the Houston Rockets lineup. That's what happened here. That's all, the minute the Houston Rockets signed Dylan Brooks, which I believe I said 2 seasons ago. Might want to check that here. It could have been last season, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, it was. I guess it wasn't 2023. Yep, so it was 2023. So 2 seasons ago. The minute the Houston Rockets signed Dylan Brooks in 2023, he was a player in which the Houston Rockets were going to look to move to upgrade their rotation. He's a very tradable contract. And I will say, Dylan Brooks, to me, he's a fine role player, not a deal breaker by any means. Kind of reminds me of Avery Bradley or Jay Crowder with the Celtics long ago, where they're valuable on court, they're valuable contractually, but they're not really deal breakers. They're very expendable for the right price. Their value is certainly there. Dylan Brooks certainly owns value within his contract and within his on-court play. However, he's very expendable for the right price. And if that price is Kevin Durant, we see here Dylan Brooks, he's traded away in this deal. And the minute Houston signed that deal, Dylan Brooks was bound to eventually be shopped on the market, if not traded, as we're seeing here today. So number one, Houston's giving up a player who they signed in free agency, didn't have to give up any assets to actually go get Dylan Brooks, signed him, except for cap space, of course, signed Dylan Brooks in free agency, plays with the Rockets for 2 seasons, and now the Houston Rockets ship him off for Kevin Durant. And it's a deal in which Houston signed initially for the asset accumulation of Dylan Brooks's deal. Not only was it his on-court play, but it was the fact that when you sign that $20 million deal and you're that type of player, a two-way player, the way Dylan Brooks is, very, very tradable contract, especially one that's descending later on down the line. So this was always bound to happen with Dylan Brooks, and it happens here in the Kevin Durant deal. So that's the first component for Houston. You don't feel too bad if you're Houston giving away Dylan Brooks. Yes, you're giving away a starter, a rotation player, somebody who set the culture the last 2 years. However, again, it's always going to be a player. He was an asset accumulation player who's possibly going to be moved on the market for an upgrade within the rotation. And that upgrade happened to be Kevin Durant. And I will say, Dylan Brooks for Phoenix. And we'll get into the Phoenix perspective a little bit more later, but he's tough. He brings personality, he brings a much needed attitude and effort to Phoenix's defense. Phoenix, if you look at the effort on defense last year, just don't look at the metrics, don't look at the numbers, look at the film and look at the effort. Phoenix owned one of the worst defenses in the league last season simply because of their effort, simply because of their attitude on that end of the floor. The team simply wasn't happy. Dylan Brooks now comes in. He's going to bring a little fire to the defensive end of the floor. He's going to bring a little personality, bring a little bit of attitude to that end. And we know he's going to be bringing that grit and grind that he learned in Memphis, that he's been carrying with himself since Oregon all the way back there, and then carried it to Houston as well. He's going to bring that to Phoenix, and that's going to do some good for Phoenix. Although Houston, they're looking at Dylan Brooks, and I should say, although Phoenix, or sorry, I meant Houston, although they're looking at Dylan Brooks as a player they were likely going to trade later on down the line when they signed him, Phoenix does get a pretty good player who could mold their culture during this retooling, rebuilding era in the future. However, Dylan Brooks was not the main name in this deal, in this Kevin Durant deal coming from the Houston Rockets. It was Jalen Green. Jalen Green was the huge talking point after this trade, and we're going to get into him a little bit more on the Phoenix side of things later. However, right now, in this deal, I think the Houston Rockets, I think they were actually happy with giving away Jalen Green's contract in this deal. And let's just state it out plain and upfront. Jalen Green owns the stigma of a top pick who's still 23 years old, yet in 4 seasons, he's been a ball dominant, non-distributive, inefficient scoring guard who's making beyond $30 million plus in the next 3 seasons and will likely always be seen as a weak link within a rotation trying to win the title. So in the next 3 seasons, Jalen Green, he's owed $33.3 million, $36 million, and then $36 million on top of that. I really, from my perspective with Jalen Green, he's always been a player who's, yes, he rode the stigma, right? He's been on the ride of stigma when it comes to his draft positioning. He was drafted second overall, and ever since that point, he's been valued as a top pick within his NBA career and developing. Yet he's 4 seasons in and hasn't necessarily made the strides you want to see from a top overall pick, a top 2 pick. And he's still 23 years old. And again, was picked second overall 4 seasons ago. However, in those 4 seasons, again, very ball dominant guard. Just not a huge distributor. Very inefficient scorer. Not an efficient shooter whatsoever. Not a threat from deep. We saw him struggle to score in the playoffs, and very inconsistent player. We saw him in the playoffs. There were a couple big games, and then there were a couple stinkers on top of that. And it's just a very inconsistent player. Yet he's making beyond the salary of a guy like Derek White per se. Derek White is owed $28 million next season, whereas Jalen Green, he's owed 33.3, and then beyond that, he's owed $36 million and $36 million. If you look at all of what comes with Jalen Green, right? The Rockets are probably just as happy to get off Jalen Green's contract as they are to receive Kevin Durant. And again, we'll get into Jalen Green a little bit more later here with the Suns, but ultimately, when you're giving up Jalen Green, I just don't see him as he might be a bad contract for the Rockets. He might be a bad contract for the Phoenix Suns. This is not necessarily we got their young gem of an asset here. It's no, the Jalen Green, although more productive than a say bust player, right? It's not a total bust. Jalen Green isn't a total bust of a second overall pick. Just not a star player. He's kind of in that range of a. I would say in his career, I wouldn't be surprised if, when all said and done, he's below a guy like D'Angelo Russell. Yeah, I believe he's on that tier of guards in the long run from where he's going to go in his career. But diving deeper into this package, the number 10 overall pick, going from Houston to Phoenix, that's Phoenix's own. Phoenix's own pick is going back to themselves at number 10. And if you're Houston giving up that pick, it doesn't really feel like you're giving up much because you traded for that pick. Now, here's how this pick made its way to Houston. It was traded away from the Suns in the Kevin Durant deal to the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets then turn around and trade that pick to the Houston Rockets. And then, of course, now we see the Houston Rockets sending that pick back to the Phoenix Suns in this trade. And the number 10 pick, it's Phoenix's own pick. So Houston, from their perspective, it doesn't really feel like they're giving up much by giving away this pick. Furthermore, the draft board, if you really look at it, study the class, right? That's very crucial. Seeing who's actually in the draft class, which we'll have more lives, and we'll talk about that later on this week. Really this week is it's coming up here in 3 days. But the NBA draft kind of thins out after the top 8 picks. The top 8 picks seem to be somewhat certified. A guy from the top 8 could fall down 9, 10, 11. We see guys fall all the time. But it seems as if the top 8 picks, there's a consensus among who should be at that top 8, right? Within that top 8. At number 10, you start getting into the range of what do you like more than this is the best guy left. You could fall into that if you're Phoenix. Say Malawach falls. Say another name falls like Jeremiah Fears, Trey Johnson, Con Knipple, something. So a name along those lines could fall in the draft to Phoenix at 10. But most likely, when it gets to 10, it's going to be more about who does one like at 10 more so than this is the best guy who's actually available. The top 8, top 9, that's going to be a little more this is the guy at this spot. You have, and as you go further, you're going to have about 2, 3, as you go into the picks, you're going to have a couple options at each pick, but after pick number 8, it really becomes a huge pool of players in which teams could like. If you're picking 5th, you're likely picking between, again, 4 players versus if you're picking 10th, you might be picking between 20 plus players. That's the difference where the draft cuts off this year. However, I did mention Phoenix could fall into one of those top 8 names at number 10. It's really not that far away. As we saw with Tyrese Halliburton, we'll talk about him a little bit later ahead of Game 7 here tonight. Tyrese Halliburton was a name that fell out of the top 10. He was considered to be a, not necessarily consensus, but he was a safe bet to be a top 10 pick, and all of a sudden he's falling 12 to Sacramento. So Phoenix could definitely fall into something good here at the number 10 pick, but it is a pick in which the top prospects thin out a little bit at pick number 10. And again, Phoenix trades that 10th pick for KD, and then Phoenix trades KD for that 10th pick. So that 10th pick just all the way back around. And so far, this package, if you're looking at it from Houston's perspective, you're giving up a bad contract in Jalen Green. Although a young player, although somewhat productive, again, bad contract in Jalen Green, a player you always expected to explore to potentially trade to upgrade later on down the line in Dillon Brooks, and the 10th overall pick, in which is already Phoenix's own. So the package already feels like, wow, you're getting Kevin Durant if you're Houston. You're basically, I see this as KCP. I understand KCP. He's 31, 32 years old. Not the same, not the same level as Jalen Green at all right now. But the Magic needed to pay to get off KCP. From my perspective, Jalen Green's contract is I understand he's 23, but he's not worth $30 million. And almost felt like before this trade, is it possible that, and again, we'll get into Jalen Green here in a little bit more. Maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but Jalen Green, he could have been a contract in which the Houston Rockets needed to pay to get off of. That's the bottom line here. And instead, they're giving him away. They're giving a player they signed in free agency and always thought they would trade away, and Phoenix's own pick. They're sending all that to Phoenix for Kevin Durant. They're getting Kevin Durant back in this deal. And they're also, I will say, Houston, they're also sending 5 second rounders in this deal. And our 5 second rounders supposed to tip the scales? Was Miami and Houston, were they bidding? Were they trying to outbid each other with second round picks? At 5 second round picks, that seems ridiculous to me. It does restock Phoenix's pick pile a little bit, because if you look at the Phoenix Suns arsenal of picks the next couple of years, it's truly horrendous how many picks they traded away for this Kevin Durant era. I mean, they pretty much don't own their first round pick for the next half decade into the 2030s. They traded away their 2031 first round pick to the Jazz last year, or rather this year, earlier in the season. But second round picks as well. These second round picks will restock the pick asset pile a little bit for Phoenix, but it's not as if they're tremendously valuable. You have a second round pick this year from Oklahoma City that's going to be 59th overall in this year's draft. Two 2026 second round picks next year, and those have a bunch of swap and implications on them. Next year's pick, one of the 2026 picks, it'll either come from the Clippers, the Pacers, the Heat, or the Celtics, ironically enough. And then the other 2026 second round pick will either come from the Thunder, the Mavericks, or the Sixers. So you have two 2026 second round picks next year if you're Phoenix incoming from this trade. And then you have a 2030 second round pick from the Celtics. So the Celtics very much involved in this deal. Some of their picks being thrown around by other teams here. And a 2032 second round pick, which is Houston's own. And I got to say, that is the farthest. I don't know if I've seen a pick yet traded out that far. So that's a 2032 second round pick coming from Houston. Those are just not extremely valuable, but they're something. They're not nothing. Something is better than nothing, but it's like crumbs, right? It's like you're not buying a whole unit of something. You're buying a little bit, right? That's what a second round pick is, essentially. And five in this deal. And what's funny about that is I would love to hear how that exactly went about, right? Was it a bidding war of second round picks between Miami and Houston to get this deal done? Was Phoenix, where did they just press on to get these second round picks added? I don't know. But that is an interesting aspect of this deal. How many second round picks? Again, not that valuable on top of what Phoenix received in this deal. But the Rockets, the main point here is the Rockets didn't give up Alperen Şengün, didn't give up Amin Thompson, didn't give up Jabari Smith Jr., didn't give up Tari Eason, didn't give up Cam Whitmore, didn't give up Reed Shepherd. So in other words, the Rockets, they didn't give up any of their actual core young talent. Şengün, Thompson, Smith, Eason, Whitmore, Shepherd. That's those players right there. That's your core of the young talent. None of those players either, except for Şengün, are paid yet. So even thinking of that, Jalen Green, out of every single Houston young guy, Jalen Green was at the top of the list of who the Rockets would have been most comfortable giving up, especially because of his contract and his play. Arguably so, Jalen Green and Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore. Cam Whitmore, there's something there. There's something there. Just the minutes aren't there, and that was more so due to the forward rotation last year. But Reed Shepherd, we don't really know what he's going to be yet. Top overall pick last year in last year's draft. Outside of them, right? Because they're a little more unknown. Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd need a little more minutes in the future. But Şengün, Thompson, Jabari Smith, and Eason, you want to pay those guys if you're the Rockets. And this trade, in my mind too, if you're giving up Jalen Green and his contract later on down the line, it actually helps the Rockets in paying some of these young guys later on down the line, because the Rockets actually got off future money in this deal. Crazy enough. I mean, the Rockets, this is a highway robbery. They get off future money. They get rid of, they get rid of future money. They get rid of Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and that's the bulk of the future money there. And they get back Kevin Durant in this deal. And this is a highway. This is absolutely a highway robbery. And Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks, their contracts the next 2 seasons. And we sort of went over this already, but let's just state it out again. So Jalen Green, he's going to be making 33.3, 36, and 36. Meanwhile, we have Dylan Brooks making 21.1 and then basically 20 million that next year. You're getting off that future money if you are the Houston Rockets. And you're receiving Kevin Durant in return, who is making $54.7 million next season. However, after the 25-26 season, he's an unrestricted free agent. So it's possible the Suns traded away all of Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, all these second round picks, the 10th overall pick for 1 year of service from Kevin Durant. That's certainly an aspect of this deal. But even if Kevin Durant walks next year, Houston then owns the ability to sign some of their young guys like Tari Eason, like Jabari Smith, like Amon Thompson. And then if Cam Whitmore and Reed Shepard come along, even those guys later on down the line. And it just gives the Houston Rockets much more room to actually do that. And I would say that the Rockets want to pay those young guys more than they actually want to pay Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks. So there's that aspect of this deal for the Houston Rockets. And Kevin Durant, let's state this too: $54.7 million next season. He's going to be a free agent. Could be a 1 year rental, but could also sign back with the Rockets under a team friendly deal. The Rockets might own the ability to pay all these other young guys and attain Kevin Durant on the roster into maybe his 40s, depending on how long Kevin Durant decides to play. Will be 37 next year. Certainly a factor in all this as well. But that exists for Houston. They didn't give up a single they didn't give up a single young guy they actually wanted to pay in the future. And on top of it, they got rid of future money in which they can now recoup into the young guys in which they actually want to pay. And Phoenix, they basically received the lesser of every single Houston young player, considering the play, the sample size, and the contract. 4 seasons of Jalen Green already. 4 seasons is a lot. When you play 4 seasons in the NBA, unless you're somebody like who just play, oh, Josh Giddey. Unless you're somebody like Josh Giddey who is 22 years old and now he just came off his 4th season. Jalen Green, he's going to be 23, 24 next year. Unless you're really, really young, right? Which Jalen Green's still pretty young there. I'll give him that. 4 seasons in the NBA is a big sample size compared to all these other young guys for the Houston Rockets. The sample size is much larger with Jalen Green. The known is a much larger with Jalen Green, and sometimes the unknown is better than the known. Reed Shepard right now probably owns a little more value to the Rockets than Jalen Green, knowing Reed Shepard, they haven't even unlocked him yet, and they're paying him $10 million a year because he's a top pick. And what he could be even better than Jalen Green in the future. You never know. A guy like Reed Shepard could come in and slot into that Jalen Green spot into the future as that second guard or that lead guard for the Houston Rockets. Still very unclear what they're going to do with Fred VanVleet this offseason. A $44 million player option remains, not a player option, a team option remains on the table for Fred VanVleet. So, and that's controlled by the Rockets. So we'll see what the Rockets do with that, whether they accept that 44 million or let it go from their books and maybe sign him to a better team friendly long-term deal, or even let him walk. We don't really know yet. But Phoenix in this deal with Jalen Green, and just talking about it from the young guy perspective of the Rockets, they just got the lesser of the young guys. Out of all the Houston young guys, Phoenix basically received the lesser. And again, the contract, it's a huge contract. The contract, in my mind, the number does not match the player's production whatsoever. Jalen Green's production, I don't believe he's worth $30 million in the NBA. I believe he's shown that. There's a big sample size of that. And you could say his play, too, is just not the play of somebody and not the play of a player who teams are necessarily looking to add onto their championship roster. You know, guys want interconnected pieces, right? Front offices, teams, coaches, executives, they want interconnected pieces. That's why we saw so many picks. Now, I shouldn't say, we went over that. KCP, they paid for KCP, blah, blah, blah. But that's why we saw the package go from Orlando to Memphis the way we did with Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane isn't this ball dominant guard. He's more of an interconnected player, and therefore he owns a little bit more value. Same thing with Drew Holiday, same thing with Derek White, same thing with a lot of guards out there who we see on contending rosters right now. Just a little more efficient, a little more effective than Jalen Green. However, the Suns' perspective. Let's bring up the Phoenix Suns because Jalen Green will now be playing for the Phoenix Suns. And again, we'll get into a little bit more of maybe not. Who knows if he's actually going to be on Phoenix next year. However, the Suns, they're now entering a retooling period, if not a rebuilding period. Considering where the Suns were at the beginning of this decade in 2020 in the bubble, going 8-0 in 2021, making the NBA Finals in 2022, grabbing the league's best record, compared to where Phoenix was at the beginning of this decade to where they are now and where they're heading after this deal, Phoenix fans, I mean, I've already been watching. I've been watching them all day, hearing them. They're not happy. They are not happy about this deal, and I wouldn't be happy either because whew, this package we've already discussed it and really went into it on the Houston side and why Houston doesn't mind giving up Dylan Brooks, doesn't mind giving up Jalen Green, doesn't mind giving up all these picks. Houston shouldn't mind giving up anything, but the package overall is very underwhelming for Kevin Durant, who the Suns traded Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, a 2023 first round pick, in which became Noah Clowney, a 2025 first round pick, a 2027 first round pick, a 2028 first round pick swap, and a 2029 first round pick for. So, in other words, here, if we're really looking at this trade from the scope of history and what the Suns turned all these assets into, essentially, the Suns traded Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, and 4 first round picks along with a first round pick swap. So basically 5 first round picks for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and 5 second round picks because they traded away. And I'll say this too. Phoenix, their 2025 first round pick is coming back to them in this deal. So that basically cancels itself out. So you're saying Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, 3 unprotected first round picks, a pick swap, a first round pick swap for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and 5 second round picks. That is awful asset management. That is awful return of investment. That is awful expected value. That is just awful by the Phoenix Suns front office. I mean, Phoenix, there's been a lot of overturn in Phoenix over the past year. This moment has been coming for Phoenix. I mean, we all saw it last season. We knew how disastrous Phoenix was when you're finishing 11th in the Western Conference, when you expect to be a top 3 team contending for the title with Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker at the top of your roster. Finishing 11th is a tremendous failure. We already saw the failure from a mile away. But now that we're here at the day, and now that we're here, we've arrived on the day in which the Suns have traded Kevin Durant. We see what the package is. We knew the Suns weren't going to get back what they initially sent away for Kevin Durant. And that's part of what they were banking on. That's part of what they were banking on. That's part of what they were banking on within this whole equation is, oh, we trade for Kevin Durant. We get super aggressive in 2022. However, or rather 2023. However, the thought was we are going to then trade Kevin Durant. We're going to flip Kevin Durant into, well, the thought with Phoenix was they were going to compete, but if they weren't, right, how they didn't the last 2 seasons. We saw they just, I mean, they flamed out in the playoffs against the Minnesota Timberwolves, swept in 2024. Then in 2025 they don't even make the play-in tournament. uh, but Phoenix initially, the plan was we either compete with Kevin Durant, or if that goes south, we then trade Kevin Durant for basically the same pile of picks and assets in which we traded for him. Right? That was the plan for Phoenix. If you at least fail with Kevin Durant, you have Kevin Durant as an asset you can trade. However, now we knew Kevin Durant at the age of 37 next season, and what the Suns, I mean, the history of the Suns, I think the Suns situation itself tanked the value of Kevin Durant. I mean, Kevin Durant, he actually played well last season, actually played up to, not, I don't want to say an MVP level, but he was in the conversation for top player in the league last year, one of the top players in the league. Uh, Kevin Durant, we knew he wasn't going to demand a huge package on the trade market. However, now that we're looking at this deal, and now we're looking at the outcome. Now that we're looking at the outcome of what the Suns actually received for the Kevin Durant era. So they received a first round. They received 2 seasons of Kevin Durant. That's something. Ticket sales and jersey sales and merchandise. Everything. That's something. A first round exit against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then an 11th seed finish. And now you get back Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, your own pick, and 5 second round picks for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, and 3 unprotected first round picks and a pick swap. That the initial KD trade was, it has to go down now as just one of the worst moves in NBA history. Seriously. Seriously. When we're talking about the scope of NBA history, right? The entire timeline. This has to go down as a top 10. I don't really like to rank things, but if there's this trade definitely the initial KD trade definitely goes into the category of one of the worst trades of all. And the only thing that can save that trade essentially is Phoenix picks somebody with the 6 picks. Now, even their own picks, like even if they pick somebody good with the 10th pick, right? And he turns the Suns franchise around. That was Phoenix's own pick in the first place. They traded away for Kevin Durant. So in order to make this trade actually valuable, if you're Phoenix, Jalen Green has to become something. Dylan Brooks has to contribute. Either both of those guys have to contribute, or you send them away for other assets on top of this. And then furthermore, these picks have to hit, whether it's one of the 5 second round picks, in which is completely unlikely, or that 10th pick, in which is Phoenix's own, in which Phoenix owned initially. So it's not like they're getting back a crazy asset here in return for Kevin Durant. But that is just where Phoenix was at the beginning of this decade. To turn all of the great fortune into what they've turned it into today, yeah, definitely should be some firings within that Phoenix front office. Again, I already mentioned there a lot of turnover. There's been a lot of turnover within Phoenix, as we've seen the last year, really, and going into this offseason. And that includes their head coach here, Steve Ott. Steve Ott, this comes from Sean Shrunny. I want to give this piece of news on the Phoenix Suns as well. But the Phoenix Suns are hiring Cleveland Cavaliers assistant Jordan Ott as the franchise's new head coach. Sources tell ESPN Ott has been an NBA assistant since 2012 and has a strong background of offensive and defensive creativity, player development, and communication. And a little note here too is so Phoenix they and I don't know if okay, so Phoenix, they move off of Mike Budenholzer, and that's a year after they get rid of Frank Vogel, and now they're on to Steve Ott. So talking about the turnover there in Phoenix a little bit, had to mention Phoenix got rid of their head coach. So there's one of the and you know I'm not all in on blaming the head coach for the entire situation, but again goes along with the turnover in Phoenix. Just a little news there from the Phoenix Suns. But again, with this deal, the deal of what Phoenix again, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, and essentially 5 first round picks. And let's face it, 3 first round picks, 3 unprotected picks, and a pick swap for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and 5 second round picks. That's that's I'm sorry. I don't even have words for that. That is oof. I would not. Oh, we cover the Celtics here on Celtics Talk Weekly. Um, let's just hope the Celtics don't make a move like that this summer. Let's just hope. One can only hope their franchise never makes a move like that, because I'm sorry, the Suns are in purgatory. The Suns fan base is in purgatory after they just went through one of the golden moments in their franchise's history, one of the golden moments in their city's history back in 2021, 2022. And now Phoenix is arguably a bottom team in the West because of that. Just that one deal, that initial deal for Kevin Durant, win all in on Kevin Durant. Oof, rough. And that's not the only, if we really dissected, that's just dissecting the Kevin Durant portion of Phoenix. If we really dove deep into every single trade in which the Suns have made, including the Bradley Beal deal, the Yusuf Nurkic deal, some of the picks in which they swapped around during the Kevin Durant era and to prepare for the Kevin Durant era, serious mismanagement of assets by the Phoenix Suns. And this is just yet another story of a bottom feeder franchise in the NBA, and which is typically seen, the Suns have been seen as a bottom feeder franchise in the NBA for the past, obviously recently they've been competitive, but before that, it was about 10 years of irrelevancy between Steve Nash and Chris Paul, right? And during that time, I mean, Phoenix is a bottom feeder team. Some of these bottom feeder teams can't get out of their way. I mean, look at Sacramento and Phoenix. Sacramento and Phoenix. Phoenix and Sacramento in 2019 looked to be absolutely nowhere. Finally, by 2021, 2022, and 2023, all these well, both of those clubs specifically, the Kings, and you could throw the Pelicans in there as well. I mean, it's just Timberwolves. I understand the Timberwolves just made the conference finals 2 years in a row, but it's just the mismanagement of assets by these bad franchises, right? With bad ownership. It's like if you have bad ownership, I'm sorry, it's going to persist over time. And I understand the Phoenix Suns. They were actually forced to sell. Robert Sarver was forced to sell the team in this past decade to Matt Ishbia, but you essentially went from one bad owner to the next. And maybe Matt Ishbia is a way better owner in time. I mean, he's a way better owner already in terms of spending money on facilities and obviously the team. I mean, he went out and made all these aggressive moves. Maybe Matt Ishbia is a better owner in time with patience, right? But coming into the building, throwing around a lot of assets right away. And they call it new owner syndrome in the NBA, right? Where a new owner comes in and he just wants to make a blockbuster move right away. Phoenix, that was for Kevin Durant, that was for Bradley Beal, and definitely marked some bad ownership there within Phoenix. Again, could turn around in the next decade plus in Phoenix, but they're a part of the class in the NBA in which just cannot get out of their own way. They attain assets and they're in a good position in a tough conference, and then all of a sudden they're back to being bottom feeders because of the mismanagement of assets, and particularly within this Kevin Durant trade. And I understand Phoenix fans right now, they are not happy and they should not be happy because this again, the value here, the transferring of value is really what I mean. You're basically, if you're Phoenix, you gave away $4 to get back a dollar. That's basically what the Kevin Durant era was about for Phoenix at the end of it, unfortunately. However, Phoenix they did get back some assets in this deal in which they could flip for other assets in the future. And one of those assets, Jalen Green. Rumors initially stated that the Suns would potentially look to reroute Jalen Green. That said, a report came out rumoring the Suns will be keeping Jalen Green. So conflicted reports there. Um, I believe the Phoenix Suns will look to move Jalen Green in the market, whether it's on draft night, beyond the draft, before free agency, during free agency. However, given the market, when we talked about Jalen Green's contract, right? Non-distributive, inefficient, ball dominant guard with a $30 million+ deal. You look at that again. He's 23 years old. I understand, but however, given the market for Jalen Green's contract specifically, Phoenix might not receive comparable market value to what Phoenix could receive if Jalen Green is simply on the team next season and on the floor for the Phoenix Suns. Therefore, Phoenix could undoubtedly stand pat for Jalen Green or on Jalen Green in terms of trading Jalen Green into the future. It's possible the market for Jalen Green just isn't that robust because of his deal. I want to reiterate, this is a young guy who people still believe in, but his contract is absolutely horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. And that's why in this deal, again, it just feels like, man, the Rockets, it doesn't even feel like they're giving up Jalen Green. It feels like, ooh, they're alleviating themselves from that contract, and yet they're still getting Kevin Durant in return. It's just ridiculous. But if the Suns want to reroute Jalen Green, there's potentially no guarantee a team will want Jalen Green's 3-year, $105.3 million deal on top of Green's basketball services because Jalen Green, we've already ran through it. I mean, just a young guy who, in my mind, a little bit in 4 seasons hasn't quite made the strides of somebody that you typically would want starting at your point guard or even shooting guard position on a championship level team. I mean, if anything, he's a glorified sixth man. Again, if he's being paid $30 million, that's a tough deal. That's a tough deal to ride with for the next couple of years. Maybe there was intel in place before the trade suggesting Phoenix would see fair market value for Jalen Green in the future. That said, I'm not convinced Jalen Green is a coveted asset who will demand a price on the market the Suns want. It's possible the Suns knew before this trade. Okay, maybe the Blazers, maybe they're interested. Maybe the Bulls are interested. Maybe the Wizards, maybe the Jazz, maybe another team out there. Mostly the bottom feeding teams. I'll say mostly the play-in tier, mostly the out of playoff teams here for Jalen Green. Teams just looking to get a little frisky with their assets maybe this summer. Teams not in the best position to win right now. It's possible Phoenix had some intel before this trade suggesting that there would be suitors for Jalen Green on the market. That said, we already mentioned Phoenix conflicting reports. A rumor came out after the first rumor came out was Phoenix will reroute Jalen Green, and then there was another rumor in which came out and it stated, nope, Phoenix they're staying with Jalen Green here. So we have conflicting reports here. 100%. We don't really know what's going to happen. We could be a lot of posturing going on. That always happens in the NBA where say a team is trying to trade a player and they're trying to get more assets back from another team, and then all of a sudden a report comes out, and oh no, we're staying with our. Oh, we got a visitor here. Wait, oh, we got a visitor live here. Well, we got to get the. What's up, Griffin? What's up? We got to
I'm
get the. This is not a bad like. Hey, we kind of free here. No graphics. Uh, but let's find the let's. All these graphics look the same here. Let's find the proper graphic. There we go.
There
There
we
we
go.
go.
I messed it up. I messed it up. That's
No,
my
you're completely fine, Griffin. You're completely fine. We all saw the green come up and the Celtics green and whatnot. But I'm going to finish this point and then I'm going to turn it over to you real quick, Griffin. I'm going to finish this point with Jalen Green. Uh, Jalen Green, does it really make sense for Jalen Green and Devin Booker to be together? Does it really make sense for Booker, Jalen Green, Bradley Beal, Jalen Green, and Devin Booker? Does it really make sense? Essentially, three players who play the same role. Does it really make sense for them all to be within the same rotation? Phoenix is still caked with ball dominant guards who aren't true playmakers. Booker is the most elite of the playmakers. But if you just look at the biggest contracts within the Phoenix Suns sphere, those deals are all guys who, in my mind, Booker, Beal, Green, they don't really fit together. They all play the same position. I do believe Phoenix will look to move Jalen Green later on down the line, not only because of the fact that they want to get more assets out of this Kevin Durant trade, but also the fact this team doesn't really have a true direction right now. The Phoenix Suns. However, finishing my point there, Griffin, got to ask you here initial reaction and thoughts to this Kevin Durant trade, because I'll give it out to the viewers right now. You were somebody who was very adamant on wanting to talk about Kevin Durant and Kevin Durant potentially to the Celtics, but I shut it down. I was like, he's not coming to the Celtics. This is not happening. There's no way. But we all knew a Kevin Durant trade was imminent. We did talk about him quite a bit. And part of our conversation was about, I don't know how many assets he'll actually attain on the market. And we see here Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the 10th overall pick, in which is Phoenix's own, and 5 second-round picks. So, Griffin, what are your thoughts? What are your initial thoughts on this Kevin Durant trade?
Well, I'm happy you shut it down, Seamus, because I hate any idea of Kevin Durant to Boston. I mean, we talked about it on the Celtics Nation Rise podcast. He's 37 years old or close to it. And you don't need that on a team, especially the assets that you're going to give away. And you saw that with the Rockets. I think, and you can think differently about this. I haven't heard your whole thoughts on it, but I think they gave up a lot for Kevin Durant. And you look at Jalen Green, yes, he's young, but like he's still, I looked at the age comparison and he's 23 years old. So you look at a 23-year-old who I think has a lot of talent in store for him. I think he's going to be a player that's going to be tremendous in all the picks you saw in there. And obviously Dylan Brooks, he's all right. He give you some good play of basketball. So I was shocked because I was at work and one of my coworkers was like, yo, Kevin Durant just got traded to the Rockets. So first of all, what's up with all these off-season trades before the finals are even over? Like that's
I know. It's like, can we wait? We're going to talk about the finals here in a little bit, but
tomorrow. Wait till tomorrow. Like what? What are we doing?
No, let's get into this conversation right now because yeah, you probably saw it in our group chat, and this is what I said. Let me just go here. So this is what I said when the trade went down. So of course, the NBA completely shoots themselves in the foot by double dipping big storylines. Game 7 tonight, and of course the KD trade on the same day. They double dipped big storylines on the same day. I know that. I understand, the NBA doesn't control everything out there. We tend to think of the NBA as if it's some kind of dictatorship and they're just ruling every team, but really it's just a governing body for individual corporations, in which are the actual NBA teams. So this deal right here, Suns make a deal, Rockets make a deal, gets to Shams Charania, gets to ESPN, it's going to be released. The NBA might not have much say. Adam Silver likely not much say. That being said, the NBA, it blows my mind, Griffin. It's like, we have ratings issues. Oh, ratings issues. Why do you have ratings issues? Because of things like this, where you're already grabbing the storyline the day of Game 7 of the NBA Finals, which hasn't happened in 9 years. We haven't seen this occasion happen in 9 years. It's one of the main topics. It's one of the main talking points in America, trending in America right now is Game 7 of the NBA Finals. It's basically like the Super Bowl right now for the NBA. And on the day of, what happens? Oh, right. The NBA runs over itself. And Kevin Durant, he's traded to the Rockets. Now all of a sudden because I'll tell you this, the reason
Yeah.
we're on live so late right now. Initially, this live was supposed to be previewing Game 7 of the NBA Finals. It was supposed to be previewing, I'll give it out to the viewers here, previewing Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And on top of that, we're supposed to be talking about the Celtics draft coming up. That segment was completely cut out because it was then replaced by Kevin Durant to the Rockets. So the main talking point here was supposed to be Game 7, and we're still going to talk about that here in a little bit. But the storyline of Kevin Durant now runs that over, and it almost makes it feel I feel like this is just not going to mesh well for the NBA in terms of elongated storylines because somebody's going to win the finals tonight, and one story or the other is going to trump the other tomorrow morning on Monday for the Monday news cycle. It's either because think the Monday news cycle. What's the biggest story right now? Is it Kevin Durant to the Rockets? Is it OKC or Indiana winning the championship? Who do wait
Yeah.
like who do, when you turn on the TV, right? 5 a.m., 6 a.m. It's on Get Up. It's like what is the first story? What's the first story in which they're going to be talking about tomorrow morning? Very unclear. And that's just
It
to
really
me, it's a detriment to the NBA because you could
you
have
do
these
have
two
the wrong.
stories. You could have one on Monday, you could have one on Wednesday, or even on Tuesday, and instead they're both headlining on Monday morning, and you don't. That's not efficient. You're
But
taking them up into one segment, into one day, and now people don't get to enjoy the fruit of NBA drama for multiple days of the year. And they do this with the presentation of their product with games. It was ridiculous. We had a Saturday in May where we didn't have NBA basketball or NHL hockey. It's like, how do you have a Saturday in May? The NBA and NHL are supposed to own May. We all know the NFL owns September to February. We understand that. That's their grounds, right? September to February, and they own that little week at the end of April into May for the draft, right? Mostly in May, all of May, it's supposed to be hockey and basketball season and how do they go a Saturday in May? Everybody's eyes are on the TV, everybody's at home chilling out. They go a Saturday without a playoff game. I mean,
well,
these are the
Seamus.
things in which just the NBA gets wrong time and time again. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, Griffin.
Yeah, I just think this. You never like. I feel like it's an unwritten rule that you just don't trade till after the finals. Like, I could see picks being traded, but like you think about trade deadline, and it's like, wow, like we're gonna wait till off season. Like I feel like it's an unwritten rule that you just don't trade till the finals are over, and that gives time for teams to look at what they have and like say a team in the finals, like say the Pacers want to be in for Kevin Durant, can they just trade one of their players for Kevin Durant and then bang he goes to the finals? Like that's so
Well, what's
I
interesting about that is the Pacers actually did make a trade during the finals. They gave up their first round pick for a future first round pick, and I forgot
yeah.
who they traded, and they gave up the rights to Mojave King, a draft and stash player. I don't remember who they traded with, but that is an interesting topic because
What if they
you
want to be
apparently can trade your pick because we've seen this 2 of the last 3 years. We saw it in 2023, the Denver Nuggets made a trade in the NBA Finals, and then we saw it again in 2025 this year. The Pacers made a deal in the NBA Finals. They made it with picks though, and draft and stash players. In terms of players, I'm definitely I want to say I'm 100% certain on the fact you can't trade a player in the middle of the NBA Finals. That that I'm certain on that. I want to say I'm 100% certain. I haven't read it in black and white, but
yeah.
if you can't trade past the trade deadline, you can't trade until your season's over. But that's
But I feel like that should
that's
be
an
a rule
interesting
for
aspect in
every
all this
you know?
is if you're gauging now the two NBA finals teams most likely they're the most secure teams going into next season. Like if you think about game 7 of the NBA finals, both teams are going to be inclined to keep the team in which they have going into next season, especially the Pacers right now. So they're not usually the NBA Finals teams are not big movers come off season time, but those are two teams that are involved in a market for players in general out there. And oh well, let's mention this Kevin Durant trade. This is why I actually this is why I also have the point of the NBA shooting themselves in the foot. This trade is not finalized, so it's basically just a news story right now. It's a verbal agreement. It's not been finalized. I bet when it's all said and done on July 6th, this is probably a 6-team deal. This is probably you'll see Orlando, Miami, Boston, the Clippers, whoever involved, sending second round picks flying around everywhere, players redirected here. It's like, oh, if we rope it into this deal, it can work under these stipulations, and we're going to see that with this expanded deal. So that again adds on to the why did this news story come out today? Why wasn't why couldn't it
why
have
can't you?
it's going to headline Monday news, but that's what I'm saying is they're double dipping. Headline tomorrow is going to be blank wins the NBA Finals, because somebody's going to win the NBA Finals tonight, whether the Thunder or the Pacers, and then it's going to be Kevin Durant traded to the Rockets. So instead of making that the Monday and Tuesday headline, they made both of the Monday headline, and I don't understand it because the deal is it won't even be completed for another 2.5 weeks.
Well, Seamus, I have to say too, you're so right with how this affects viewership, because it's like, all right, look, even if the trade went through and finalized, like you wait to report that till tomorrow or the day after, because you have a lot going on. And that's why it's just like, why can't we make the rule everyone has to be in their off season before trades? Because I think that overlaps and it's just such a pain. But this is my thing on Kevin Durant. I think that the Suns won the deal ultimately. I don't know what you said.
No. Go ahead.
That's
I'll
my
let you
version.
go. I'll let you fire away here, but there is no way in my mind the Suns won this deal.
All
There's
right, but
absolutely no
I look
way.
at I look at this. I look at this. I look at this. I am not a fan of Durant, and I look at this. They gave up a hefty load for a 37-year-old, and I just look at that. I look at that. Yes, the Rockets are contenders, and they're a good team, but you gave up a hefty load for a 37-year-old. That's just my thought. I just look at that, and it's like, when this trade does finalize, however, Seamus, if we see the Rockets get more in return and more assets around Kevin Durant, whether it be picks or anything, I think that the Rockets can win it. But you're looking at, what was it, the 10th pick this year?
Well, let me explain this. Okay. To me, the Rockets gave up Jack Diddley squat in this deal because number one, Jalen Green, he's 23 years old, and I understand people think there's more of a horizon for him to become a better player in the league. That's fair for a 23-year-old. But looking at his deal in the future, his deal was always going to hamper the Rockets from potentially paying some of the young guys in which they actually want to pay into the future. Amin Thompson, Shangoon, Cam Whitmore, guys like that, Reed Shepard. If you go through the whole young guy list, Amin Thompson, Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, all of those guys, all the Houston young guys. Now Houston can adequately pay going into the future, knowing number one, Kevin Durant, he's making $54 million next year. Maybe he demands an extension beyond that. But what will that extension actually look like? It'll probably be definitely be a way lower number than $54 million. On top of that,
Totally.
it's likely going to be a short-term deal with him inching towards his 40s. So they're giving up future money. The Rockets are actually alleviating themselves of future money in Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green. And Green, to me, is just a bad contract. He makes more money than Derek White. He's not more valuable than Derek White whatsoever. But you look at Dillon Brooks, and the perspective of him, they signed him as a free agent. And yes, in Celtics Nation, I would say we value Dillon Brooks higher than a lot of players out there because of what
But
he did at the TD Garden this past season and put up 10 3-pointers and was kissing goodbye to the fans and doing the whole Tatum celebration. So Celtics Nation, I understand Dillon Brooks, might own a little bit more value, but Dillon Brooks under a $20 million contract, the Rockets were always looking at him as a tradable piece they could look to add into a deal for the salary purposes or just for the on-court value and potentially upgrade the rotation, if not himself.
well,
So those two
Seamus,
players at the top, you're getting rid of future money, and that's a valuable thing within this deal. But then the tenth pick is Phoenix's own. Like 10th pick, you're giving up a pick if you're the Rockets. It's not as if the Rockets are giving away their pick. They're giving away Phoenix's own pick. It's like,
Okay,
oh,
so
I'll take it back. It's like, we have your pick, and just take it back. It's like, this was, if you're looking at it from Phoenix's perspective, Phoenix is going, this pick was already ours. It's like, we're not even getting anything. It's like, it was already ours. It's a big thing for them to actually get their pick back. I will say that because, no first round pick after the season, which they just had. Terrible for them. But it's their own pick. And then on top of that, 5 second-round picks. I mean, 5 second-round picks, whatever. Whatever. I understand one of those players could be Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Nikola Jokic, who knows? But it's 5 second-round picks. And I wonder if that was part of the bidding war between Miami and Houston or whatever was going on there. But from my perspective, Houston, they kept all of the young core in which they really care about, not under bad deals, not inefficient players they want to slot into the rotation later on down the line. They kept all their young guys. They alleviated themselves of future money and added a player onto their roster in which actually fills a legitimate need as a bucket getter, a crunch time scorer, in which Houston lacked last season. So from my perspective, Houston just made out with this deal 100%. And Phoenix, on the other hand, and I'll give this out. I already said it a million times here before we got here, Griffin, but I'll say it for you. Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, Noah Clowney, which was a 2023 first-round pick, 2025 first-round pick, and which is the 10th overall pick coming back to Phoenix right now, a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 first-round pick swap, and a 2029 first-round pick, all unprotected, for Kevin Durant, in which they now trade for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and their own pick back. So that basically canceled out. That's a huge. You're giving up 3 unprotected first-round picks and a pick swap, along with Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and Jay Crowder for now Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and your own pick back and 5 second-round picks.
Well, Seamus, I have to say this. I think the only thing that you look from the Suns' standpoint, from that trade value, then, is the fact of jersey sales, because we said this on Celtics Nation Rise. I think you said this is Durant brings in jersey sales. It's one of those guys who everyone's going to buy a Durant.
No, the last 2 seasons, I would say that's something.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like from a money standpoint, it probably brought in some money. However, you gave up a lot for Durant.
No, but see, that's the sacrifice of the future, because you could say, oh, the last 2 seasons, maybe they made more in merchandise sales, ticket sales, jersey sales. Actually, the Suns arena has never been we've never looked at the Suns and went, whoa, what a ruckus crowd or what a great crowd. But I've heard from inside sources here, the Phoenix crowd, not too bad this past season, very crowded and very crowded for games in which weren't all that competitive. Let's face it, Phoenix was an 11 seed last season. So it's not as if, Phoenix didn't make some money off of Kevin Durant the last 2 seasons. However, that deal now for Kevin Durant and those 2 seasons could make Phoenix irrelevant for the next 5, 6, 7 seasons. Who knows? Phoenix's pick arsenal, I mean, they're restocking it a little bit. They've done a good job of restocking it a little bit in this deal with the second round picks. And they made a deal earlier before the trade deadline. They traded away their 2031 first round pick for 3 different first round picks with protections and gave themselves a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of that deal, but gave themselves a little bit more of a pick arsenal, expanded their pick arsenal a little bit. But Phoenix, they don't own too many picks going into the future. And within all this, I think Phoenix, it's possible they have now set themselves up for irrelevancy, in which could ultimately cost them money the next half decade going into the 30s. And that's where you balance this out and go, yeah, maybe those 2 seasons brought in revenue with Kevin Durant, but all of a sudden those 2 seasons cause 5, 6, 7 bad years. And Phoenix, different ownership now. Not the new ownership syndrome is a thing. Maybe Matt Ishbia is a little bit better of an owner in time than what he's presented at the initial precipice of his Phoenix tenure here. But Phoenix, they've been bad in the past. They've been in that Sacramento category in the past, the New Orleans category, the category of bad teams who just can't get out of their own way. Phoenix has been there before through 10 years of irrelevancy, from basically the end of Steve Nash, right, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, that era, basically 2011, 2012, all the way to the bubble. So, I mean, that was basically a decade. The entirety of the 2010s, Phoenix was irrelevant. it's possible with this trade, the initial Kevin Durant trade, and then what they turned him into today, that deal sets Phoenix up for the same timeline of irrelevancy. Maybe it's not as robust. Maybe it's not 8 years to 10 years. Maybe it is only half decade. But I think Phoenix right now, they're a bottom five team. They might be a bottom five team in the NBA. They're definitely a bottom five situation in the NBA. I think many more moves await Phoenix after this deal. The Suns, they're free agents this offseason. Tyus Jones, Mason Plumlee, Bol, Monte Morris, and Damian Lee. That makes the roster right now after this trade. You have Devin Booker, you have Micic, you have Jalen Green, Bradley Beal, Grayson Allen, Dylan Brooks, Royce O'Neal, Cody Martin, Ryan Dunn. You have Iguodaro and Nick Richards. So right now, Phoenix, their entire roster, if you just
Yeah.
were to analyze that, I know I'm saying all these names, but there's no true point guard. There's no efficient forward scorer. I mean, literally, they have what? You could make an argument that they literally have one, two, three, four, five, almost 8 shooting guards that some of them play forward. Dylan Brooks can play forward. O'Neal can play forward. Cody Martin, more likely a forward. Grayson Allen can play at the forward position. But most of those guys are really shooting guard types, not true point guards, not efficient scoring forwards, not wildly versatile forwards at all, and they're lacking a center rotation. Nick Richards is their only center. Nick Richards, and don't get me wrong, I love Nick Richards, but he can't be your only center. So
And
they're lacking in a ton of areas here. They're many more moves away, but they're a playing team at best next season without a substantial change in fate. And from what I see right now after this Kevin Durant deal and what the assets in which they held in the beginning of the 2020s, what they turned that into. I mean, Phoenix was the best situation in the NBA going into 21-22. The year the Celtics made the finals, the Phoenix Suns were the best situation in the NBA. Now, by 2025, in the summer of 2025, trading away Kevin Durant, they're a bottom five situation in the NBA.
well, can I
100%.
can I say my final take on this too? My final take is this. I look at what you said too, and I agree. I feel like, for Phoenix situation, they've always been, let's get the top guy. I feel like they built a great team with Chris Paul, and that team that went to the NBA finals, and they built something great there. But then they're like, all right, well, we've wanted Durant for a while now. Let's go after the top dog and give up a lot of our depth and what we have and what we made in Phoenix. And they gave up a lot of that, and it just came and bit them in the ass, essentially, like you said. So it's rough from that standpoint. And I look at it like this. I look at it like this. I think it's undeniable that we knew that Kevin Durant was going to be traded this offseason. We knew it. I think it's shocking that he wasn't traded at trade deadline. I think that's the shocking part. But, we knew Houston was up there. We knew San Antonio could be up there. Like, there were some options. But I think we all knew that the Rockets were going to be a big trade destination for him. That's why I'm not so shocked. I think it was just shock. Originally I just heard the pick, but then I heard Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green. And I do agree with this, Seamus. I do agree that right now he's not where you want him with the money wise, but I do think he's very young and he could develop into a good player. And it just takes, some time to develop. However, Dylan Brooks, he's not a top tier guy. I feel like that's one guy that you're like, oh, well, all right, look at him. We could have got more assets. But I do like Jalen Green. However, I do not like the situation he is in with the Phoenix Suns because, as you said, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Jalen Green now. So I think I agree with you. I bet they're going to move off of Jalen Green and get more young assets. I think that's the smart thing to do. However, if they move off of guys like Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, then you could build Jalen Green into a piece in Phoenix because, again, 23 years old, he's young. He's a player that could have just got drafted this year, so I think there's a lot more in store for him because you look at Baylor Shireman. I mean, he's 24 and he is older than obviously Jalen Green. Obviously, Jalen Green has had more experience in the NBA, but you don't know where his peak can really be. So I think you're very great to have that young asset. However, with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, you're not going to get a lot of success out of Jalen Green. But if they moved off of them, then I could see them kind of building something in Phoenix.
There was a report out there as well that the Suns will look to move off of Bradley Beal. That being said, Bradley Beal, no trade clause. Him and LeBron, the only two players with a no trade clause in the NBA, surprisingly so, but no trade clause for Bradley Beal. So wherever he's going to be sent on his horrendous deal, he's going to have to approve. Gets really tough when you start talking about that because not only do teams not want Bradley Beal's deal, they're going to. So the three impasses in Phoenix potentially getting rid of Bradley Beal. Number one, he's making $50+ million to be a glorified sixth man. So there's that problem. He's basically in the Paul George pool of former stars who have declined yet still make star money. So he's in that pool. Phoenix will have to trade picks in order to actually get off that Bradley Beal deal. And that's not the business in which Phoenix is in right now whatsoever. They just attained a bunch of picks. They don't want to trade those same picks away just to get off of Bradley Beal's contract. And number three, Bradley Beal's no trade clause. Wherever Bradley Beal's sent, Bradley Beal is going to have to okay and confirm that trade. So three impasses within the Suns potentially moving off of Bradley Beal. Going to be very hard this summer to do, as it was at the trade deadline. The summer it does make it a little bit different, but not extremely in terms of the Suns trying to get off of Bradley Beal. However, you mentioned Devin Booker within this equation. I think right now the Suns should look to move off Devin Booker. I think this might be the fork in the road where they look to go, all right, let's lean more into the rebuild, the retool, let's take a step back and let's mine full value out of Devin Booker because Devin Booker, he's going to be 29 next season, 9 years in Phoenix up to this point. 9 years in Phoenix, 29 next season. Devin Booker in the meat of his prime. If you were to trade anybody for the Phoenix Suns, including Kevin Durant, Devin Booker is the most coveted asset on the Phoenix Suns. He is the player in which would return the most assets to the Phoenix Suns. It was not Kevin Durant, even though Kevin Durant, we just saw him traded today. It's Devin Booker. So if the Suns really wanted to cash in on him, I think right now would be the time. He's 29 years old in the meat of his prime. They're not going anywhere the next couple of seasons. And we'll even let's just paint this history. Paint the picture of history for folks. So the Suns, they won under 25 games the first 4 seasons of Devin Booker's career. So Devin Booker already a track record of losing with the Suns. I don't know if he wants to go into the same slot of history again, the same slew of history again. But the Suns, they finally turned that bad play around in 2019-20 when they, of course, added our guy Aaron Baines into the organization. If anybody if anybody remembers the Sun official Aaron Baines fan page account on Twitter, man, I wish Aaron Baines was still in the NBA so that we could enjoy the great art that comes out of that fan page. However, they were 8-0 in the bubble in 2020, didn't make the playoffs, but that was pinpointed as the turnaround for Phoenix, where Phoenix, they were a lot better in 1920. They weren't over 500. They didn't make the playoffs, but they were a lot better than below 25 wins. And they went 8-0 in the bubble and did pretty much everything they could after COVID to make the playoffs, yet didn't. But their window of contention essentially started in 2021 when they traded for Chris Paul. When that trade went down, that was a great deal for Phoenix. If you look back at it, went out and got Chris Paul, and he made them super competitive in his time in Phoenix. But the window of contention essentially starts in 2021 and ends in 2023. Really, 2023 was the last time in which Phoenix could have won the title. 2021, Phoenix was, I mean, they had a 2-0 lead in the finals. They could have easily won that NBA finals in 2021. 2022, Phoenix, 64-win season, first seed in the West, best record in the league. They were expected to make it all the way to the finals, did not. In the semifinals, collapsed at home in Game 7 to the Dallas Mavericks, and that starts that whole storyline. But then the next year they go and
Looks like we lost Seamus, so I'll take over really quick. I just have to say what he was going off of. You look at the Phoenix Suns and what they have done, and I think we're back.
we gotta
Fix
here we go.
this really quick.
Some
Seamus,
technical difficulties.
I
Where
took
was
over,
I here?
I took over for you though.
But 2023, the Phoenix Suns trade for Kevin Durant halfway through that season, right? 2023. They own a chance to win the title that year because the series was 2-2 versus Denver in the second round, and Denver went on to actually win the title that year. If they beat Denver, the road is wide open. Denver beat an 8 seed, a 4 seed, a 7 seed, and an 8 seed to win the title. Phoenix, they could have beat the Clippers in round 1, they could have beat the Nuggets in round 2, and then in rounds 3 and 4, you're looking at the 7 seed Lakers and the 8 seed Heat. Easily that season, Phoenix could have come out with the title as well. 21, 22, 23. Phoenix was very much in the running for all three of those titles. 24, absolutely not. Very underwhelming regular season. Could never get it going. Finished at the end of the season with a 6 seed, swept out of the first round of the playoffs. And it was almost one of those over the hill moments where you're going, oh, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're really here. And the Phoenix Suns, they're maybe like Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, maybe a little over the hill there. And then this past season, they finish as the 11 seed. So they're not competitive this past season. And I'll tell you this, next year, they're not going to be competitive whatsoever. They're going to be a potential bottom feeder in the West, in a deep Western Conference next year. I already said this, they're potentially a bottom 5 situation in the NBA. And Booker, he'll only be in his prime for so long. Booker, I mean, look at Booker's reaction to the end of the 2021 NBA Finals. Remember, he's pulling his jersey out and he's watching Giannis celebrate, and the Bucks team celebrating on court, and all the confetti's coming down, and Giannis is celebrating, and Devin Booker is over there pulling up his shirt, going, "Damn!" You can just read his lips. He's going, "Damn!" And it's just wow, how close they came to winning those finals. But KD, Beal, Booker, that iteration of the Phoenix Suns the last 2 seasons, very unhappy. I mean, the team, we saw the Suns twice. I mean, Griffin, we did post games on it at the end of the season. We saw the Suns twice. We beat them by 30. The Celtics beat the Suns by 30 out in Phoenix at the end of the year. And then we came home and beat them at the TD Garden. In both games, it felt like street ball. It felt like minimal effort from the Suns defensive unit.
I mean, Seamus, you said it. Like, you look at those games, and those games look like the Phoenix Suns back when they were in that slump. And
yeah, like 2016, 17, 18, 19, all those years.
And I think that's the upsetting things for Phoenix Suns fans, because they don't want to get back there. And like, they were so close to being a dominant team, with Chris Paul in that version of the Suns. And I think they essentially blew it up when trading for Kevin Durant. Like, you could have had some pieces, DeAndre Ayton was a great center that they had. They had a good team. And then essentially you blew it up again. So I'm interested to see what they can do, because if you're the Suns, you have to move off of Bradley Beal. You just have to. Devin Booker, you could get some good assets for him, and maybe pair him with Jalen Green, because again, you don't know what Jalen Green can become. However, he is not going to be successful with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal there. It's just not going to happen. But it's frustrating for Suns fans. And like you said, Seamus, when we faced the Phoenix Suns, it was like blowout games. And those were easy games for us. Those were like, you look back and like the Raptors game when we beat them by 50, those were games with minimal effort, like you said, and just like easy games. I mean, that was a game that Jason Tatum was trying to come back and play for, because he's like, all right, well, I can come back for this, when he got hurt against Sacramento the time before. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I see it becoming a dumpster fire over there again. And that's not what Suns fans want, as, I feel like you said, the arena has been booming a little more recently, and that's positive because it was dormant. And you look at that, it was dormant before. And we might be heading back towards that dormant arena as Durant's gone. So that gives a lot of people less time to go there, because they're like, oh, Durant's not there. And now they could suck again, which sucks, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and on top of all this, for Phoenix, well, first of all, Griffin, yes or no, do the Phoenix Suns trade Devin Booker this offseason from your perspective? I believe they should. Will they? That's another conversation. I like to read tea leaves a lot in the NBA, right? Or just in anything, and I go, okay, let me connect these dots, right? It's like, here's this independent report, here's this. the way the Phoenix Suns roster is right now, I'm sure like this is where I feel as if the rumors about them rerouting Jalen Green and then now the posturing of, oh no, we're not, like I feel like the the first initial want of Phoenix is to route Jalen Green out of the building, route Bradley Beal out of the building, and both of those guys, you get assets in return for them. Well, probably not Bradley Beal, but at least Jalen Green. But even those, I mean, both of those contracts, I don't want if I'm other teams. So I don't know how many assets you could really get out of those guys. But say they Phoenix, if they want, maybe they can get assets out of specifically Jalen Green, and then all of a sudden you start retooling around Devin Booker. You have a little bit more money. Like I'm maybe I would say initially Phoenix wants to build around Devin Booker, but I also see Devin Booker looking at the situation and Phoenix looking where they're at within the standings right now and what their outlook is for the future. And I could see the Suns and Devin Booker agreeing upon potentially moving different directions. I could 100% see that because there
I
are a lot of shooting guards here. The
I will
Phoenix
say
roster is
this
a
though.
mess. Devin Booker's lost in Phoenix before. He just went through a contending window with Phoenix, and he's in the meat of his prime. He's 29 next season. So what you're talking about at Phoenix, if they're going to rebuild this situation, what are they going to be contending again when he's 31? You might as well trade him when he's 29.
I agree. I agree. You could get the most assets for him. However, Devin Booker
And
is
you don't
very
want to sit
loyal.
on these things either, in my opinion, because he's going to form the losing stink. People forget about the losing. When you are on a bad team, people don't want you. Okay, Devin Booker, before the Phoenix Suns started winning, he was always seen as good stats, bad team guy. Good stats, bad team. The minute the Phoenix Suns start winning, people realize all the great intangibles of his game and how valuable of a player he is. Yet now, with the Suns go back to losing, now you're getting Booker into his 30s. You're still going to be able to get something out of him if he doesn't sustain a catastrophic injury later on down the line. But might as well trade him now for his peak value of okay, he's coming off an era where we actually succeeded. He's 29, he's in the meat of his prime, he holds his peak value. Maybe in 2 years, teams look at him and go, I'm 31 years old, losing team the last 2 seasons, didn't do much to impact that 11 seed team 3 years ago. So to me, right now might be the time. And we've seen teams in the past, they've been bit before by not jumping and being proactive, right? Teams are
Yes.
like, look at the Suns. I mean, and then they weren't going to be proactive with getting rid of Kevin Durant necessarily when they only have him for 2 seasons, but specifically with Devin Booker, you might want to be a little bit more proactive with D Book than reactive, because if you're reactive 2 seasons from now, you might have nothing to show for the last 2 seasons, and you're giving away Devin Booker for a lesser pool of assets. So for me, Phoenix, you might as well just start it up right now. Start it up. Start up the tank and the rebuild right now, because in my mind, this isn't going anywhere the next one, even 2 seasons. And then if it doesn't, like, here's how I see the future. It's not going to go anywhere in the next 2 seasons. Griffin, the end of that second season, at least, or even next season, after the one season, Devin Booker, he's going to look at the situation. He's going to be 30, 31 years old, and he's going to go, what's my place here? What's
Well,
my place? And I want to compete because I know I'm a player who competed in the NBA Finals all the way back in 2021. Is he going to have to wait till 2030 to compete in that on that same stage again?
and I
This
will
is
say
where I
this.
just it leads me to the conclusion of the Suns trading away Devin Booker potentially as soon as this offseason. And I would seriously consider it if I were them.
I
Seriously.
well, I look at this. He's been very loyal to his team. He came in on a bad team. He stuck through them through thick and thin. And then, he was at the peak point where the Suns almost win the finals, but now we're going back down a hill. And does Devin Booker want to wait till the Suns are good? I don't know. And like you said, this is where you get peak value for him. So either you trade him now or you're just going to let this guy rot in your organization, when you could get value for him. However, like you said, it's unfortunate, but there could be an injury down the line or something could happen that he just declines, his game declines, and you don't get what you can get for him right now. So to answer your question, should the Suns trade him? Yes. However, do I think they will this year? No, because they love Devin Booker. That's their guy.
And I'm going to point this out too. As we know, within the Celtics organization out in Boston, It's often the tough moves, right? The tough emotional moves that sometimes get teams from point A to point B. Devin Booker, although he's been with the franchise for nearly a decade, next year will be his 10th year, and he's been to the NBA Finals, done a lot of winning with the Suns, also done a lot of losing, but although he's been a staple there in Phoenix, it might be the best thing for the Suns to emotionally detach themselves from Devin Booker right now, move on, so it sets them up for the next era. Because I mean, look at the Celtics, emotionally attached to Marcus Smart, but once they broke that emotional attachment, what did it lead us to? It led us to Kristaps Porzingis and an NBA title. So it's moves like that. I understand Phoenix isn't close to a title or anything like that, but again, you sometimes it's better to get ahead of things, and it's better to emotionally detach from a situation and move on to the next situation, because the sooner you move on to the next situation, the sooner it is you'll get back to winning, specifically if you're the Phoenix Suns.
No,
But ultimately, Kevin Durant in this deal, I don't think the Suns received very good offers for Kevin Durant whatsoever, looking at the bulk of this deal, and especially considering uh, the two teams bidding for Kevin Durant. It was Miami and Houston at the end. San Antonio didn't seem like they were as big of a part of it. They were in the sweepstakes, but not as big of a part of it. But Houston and Miami at the end, I wonder if those second round picks, that was part of the bidding war between those two teams. Houston's just throwing a bunch of second round picks out there. But Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, Phoenix's own pick, and 5 second round picks. I don't know if Miami could beat that. Miami, if they're not giving up Adebayo and Hero, which they're just not in this deal, you're looking at Andrew Wiggins. You're looking at Terry Rozier, our guy, Scary Terry. You're looking at Duncan Robinson, and then those are the bulk contracts you're probably trading in a Kevin Durant deal. The problem with these deals, there's not a certified. I don't see a player with as much young value as Jalen Green, because even though Jalen Green's contract in my mind is awful, he's still 23. Andrew Wiggins is 30. Terry Rozier is 31. Duncan Robinson is 31. So the young guy value just simply isn't there if you're not getting Adebayo and Hero. And the Heat weren't giving up Adebayo and Hero for Kevin Durant in this deal, unfortunately. And then you get to the draft picks. I don't think Miami had a pick as good as Phoenix's own 10th overall pick in this year's draft plus future draft capital. So I think the offers for Kevin Durant clearly from this deal weren't very robust. And Miami, the other team looking to potentially make a move for Kevin Durant, they just didn't have the asset pools, or they didn't have the asset pool, whether it's picks or players. So the clearly from the trade, in my mind, the market for Kevin Durant was very shallow, very shallow. However, Phoenix does trade away Kevin Durant. They get back Dylan Brooks in return, who Phoenix almost received years ago. As we transition Griffin here out of the program, it'll be me solo here talking about Game 7 going forward. But first, we have to go and revisit this storyline from long ago, all the way back in December of 2018. So it's always great to see Adrian Wojnarowski and his name out here, and the retired NBA reporter for ESPN and formerly Yahoo Sports as well. Sources with Zach Lowe, all the way back in December 2018. I guess should I give some background before I read this here? Let's give some background. So the background of this is essentially back in December of 2018, the Wizards, the Suns, and the Grizzlies were involved in a three-team deal, and it involved Kelly Oubre primarily, and those three teams were trying to come together. Uh, they were trying to come together to form a deal between Trevor Ariza, Kelly Oubre, and sending them from one place to the other. Trevor Ariza, he was on the Suns at the time. Kelly Oubre on the Wizards, and the Grizzlies, they were involved in this three-team trade. Basically, what happened here was the Grizzlies involved in this deal thought they were sending Marshawn Brooks to the Phoenix Suns. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Suns thought they were receiving Dylan Brooks from the Memphis Grizzlies. And here's how here's how this reads here. Sources with Zach Lowe, deal in jeopardy over which Brooks, Marshawn, or Dylan. The Suns believed they were getting in this trade. Memphis will not put up Dylan Brooks in the trade, sources said. So yeah, and not too much here on the tweet, but the whole background story. Long ago, 2018, 7 years ago already. Doesn't seem like 7 years, but somehow it was. A three-team deal between the Wizards, the Grizzlies, and the Suns. The Suns were trying to trade Trevor Ariza out of the building. The Grizzlies trying to trade Marshawn Brooks, and the Wizards trying to trade Kelly Oubre. The Suns, they thought they were getting back Dylan Brooks in the deal. The deal never happened. The deal fell apart. And then eventually, a week later, the Suns and Wizards went ahead and did a deal on their own. And it included Trevor Ariza and Kelly Oubre swapping the Phoenix front office and the Washington front office swapping Trevor Ariza and Kelly Oubre along with a bunch of picks for each other there. And that's what so Phoenix, so look at this story from a long time ago. Phoenix finally got their guy. Phoenix finally ends up with Dylan Brooks, the guy they thought they were getting all the way back in 2018 in a deal for Trevor Ariza and including Kelly Oubre as well. So a little history there for the NBA circle. However, more history awaits us tonight. And NBA circles, NBA community, whatever you want to call it, NBA circles. I don't know. We have both. But this brings us to our last segment, which will be previewing Game 7 of the 2025 NBA Finals, in which is we're about 30 minutes away from tip-off, so good timing here. Good preview show, or good timing for a preview here of these two teams facing off in Game 7 tonight. And let's face it, we previewed a lot of these two teams over the course of the finals, and not even previewed, but analyzed these two teams over the course of the finals and even before the finals in the playoffs. So I'm not going to talk too much about X's and O's here, just talking about more so the atmosphere of tonight in Game 7. Tonight's Game 7, very historic. Any Game 7 of the NBA Finals will be historic. Always is. Always will be. It's the NBA's Super Bowl. It's whoever wins tonight wins the championship. That's the Super Bowl right there. That's the football model. That's what the NBA wants in this situation. I expect the game to be tight. I expect both teams to be feeling the nerves. And I don't really feel as if, I understand the Thunder, they're at home here, but I don't feel as if any team owns a real massive advantage in this one, simply because of the circumstances in which are meeting us here tonight in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, which is a very rare occurrence. 9 years ago, 2016, the last Game 7 of the NBA Finals, when the Cavs and Warriors faced off with each other. And that was an iconic game, included two iconic moments at the end of the game. Number one, Kyrie Irving, his huge shot, and then LeBron James, huge chase down block on Andre Iguodala. Two iconic moments at the end of that Game 7. An iconic moment for the city of Cleveland, for LeBron James, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, for Kyrie Irving, for everybody involved in that championship. And even on the other side, a terrible moment for the Golden State Warriors and the Oakland fan base at the time out there sporting the Warriors in California. Game 7, 9 years ago, a lot of iconic moments. Tonight has the chance to produce some of the same moments. Ultimately, when you have two teams competing for 48 minutes, the final 48 minutes of the season, for who will win the title, I mean, this is going to be a battle. It's going to be a war. It's going to be ferocious. It's going to be vicious. This is all hands on deck, all effort exhausted. This game is going to be the best game of the season. Okay, I feel confident in saying that. I do not see a blowout here. I might look stupid. You guys can come back here and comment on the YouTube page. You can clip me up. I don't care. I believe tonight's game will be the best game of the NBA season on the last day of the 24-25 NBA season, because when you have these two teams with the competitive spirit in which they own, the Thunder and the Pacers, the depth in which they've owned, the history in which they own, and this spot, 48 minutes for the title, there is no way this is a blowout. There is just absolutely no way. This will be a possession for possession game. The game will be tight, and both teams will be feeling the nerves in this one. And generally, the market, they remain confident. The market remains confident in the Thunder. The Thunder are 7-point favorites at home in Game 7 going into this spot. In the series, the score so far is 662 to 655 in favor of the Thunder. So talking about, the home court matters in terms of the points within the market. However, in the series, OKC straight up in 3 games, home and away, they're up by 7. They're up by 7 points through 6 games. 7 points, and they're 7-point favorites tonight in Game 7. Found that to be a little amusing there. But shows the fact OKC They are the favorites going into this game. Although they're not heavy favorites, right? The Pacers aren't heavy favorites. They're considerable underdogs. I see the NBA Finals. I see Game 7 of the NBA Finals, not the NBA Finals, but Game 7 of the NBA Finals specifically as a coin flip. If any team makes it to Game 7 of the NBA Finals, they shouldn't be considered heavy underdogs. And like I said, the Pacers aren't heavy underdogs, yet they're considerable underdogs. And I understand the market and trends in which play out. However, I do have a little bit of a theory. I feel like the result of a game 7 in the NBA Finals owns the least amount of correlation to past results, suggesting the trend of what should happen in that game 7. So the whole points market is based off of past results. It's what already happened. Everything is baked into the market. From my perspective, this is just a theory. I feel as if the situation in game 7 of the NBA Finals, 48 minutes for the title between two teams, no matter the home court, no matter the reputation of the two teams, I don't feel as if the result of game 7, I don't think it owns a ton of I don't believe it owns as much, right? There is, I'm not going to say no correlation, but as much correlation to past results as say a game 6, a game 5, a normal regular season game. Playoffs, you get into situations where teams, they're up against the wall. They have their backs up against the wall. They have to win a game. That becomes a different circumstance in the NBA playoffs. But tonight, both teams have to win this game. And I just believe game 7s are different. We haven't seen one in 9 years in the NBA finals, 9 years in this century so far. We've only seen 4 of them. 4. So the sample size to suggest what should happen, it's not large. It's not large whatsoever. Road teams are 4-15 all time in game 7s in the NBA finals. That's certainly something. Road teams are never own a good record in game 7s, period, no matter what round. But of the NBA finals, out of the 19 game 7s in NBA finals history, road teams are 4-15. So that's something going against the Pacers. However, 9 of the 19 teams who forced the game 7, so 9 of the 19 teams who forced the game 7 went on to win game 7. So that would be the Pacers in this situation. So of the 19 teams who forced, 19 teams, they were down 3-2 in the series, needed to win that 6th game to go to the game 7. 9 of the 19 teams who won that game 6 went on to win game 7. So a little more favorable of a stat there for the Pacers, but this becomes even more favorable when you consider 5 of the last 6 game 7s, or 5 of the last teams who have forced, 5 of the last 6 teams who have forced a game 7 in the NBA finals have won the NBA finals. So in more modern terms, the last 6 game 7s in the NBA finals, right? The last 6, 5 of those saw the team in which forced the game 7 win the NBA finals. So the Pacers, they're in that situation tonight, although they're within that category of road teams, 4-15 in 19 tries in game 7 of the NBA finals. They're in that category of teams who forced the game 7, teams who might own a little bit of that momentum. Those teams, 9 out of the 19 teams won the NBA finals in 5 of the last 6. So that's the important one. 5 of the last 6, very modern. Again, small sample size. But for the Pacers, they certainly, when you're playing in a game 7 of the NBA finals, you have a chance to win the title. You have a chance to win the game. You have a chance to win in 48 minutes. You have a chance to win by 1, by 2. The Pacers have a chance tonight. And the Pacers, it's just about winning the turnover battle, the possession battle, playing as a collective unit, playing confident. We're not going to get into a ton of X's and O's here, but everything the Pacers have done all season long and into the NBA playoffs, that's what the Pacers have to do tonight in order to pull out the title. And no matter what, no matter how people view this run in the long term with the Pacers, people might look at the Pacers and go, "Oh well, they didn't win." Say if the Pacers lose tonight, people will go, "Ah, they didn't win the title, but they weren't even supposed to be there." And wow, they really challenged the Thunder. They beat the Cavs. They made it to the finals. They made it to Game 7. People will give the Pacers kudos after potentially losing Game 7. That being said, the Pacers won't they won't feel that way. When you have 48 minutes for the title, the Pacers, they think right now in their heads they're winning this game tonight. Okay? I can tell you straight up, being in the same basketball, we have to win situation, they're thinking we're winning this game tonight. we're holding up the trophy. And if they don't, there's going to be massive disappointment from the Pacer locker room. And it doesn't matter what the road, the journey, the expectations have been up to this point. When you are in game 7 of the NBA Finals, you know you can win. You know you can win. You think you can win. And the Pacers, that's where they're at right now. And I'll say, even though people pinpoint them as underdogs, they don't see themselves as underdogs, and they don't see themselves as a team who's just going to be happy with, we made it to the NBA Finals and forced game 7. Nope. They lose tonight, they are going to be disappointed. So the Pacers, I think people have given them a lot of respect at this point. I don't think, and even though they're 7-point underdogs, I don't think people view them as the little brother in this series as much as they did coming into this series anymore. So the Pacers, I do feel as if there's increased respect for them, especially from me out there. That being said, on the other side, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Can I get one more negative Thunder segment off before they hold the trophy up in front of my face and stick it to me here? The Thunder, for some reason all season, I wanted to zag against the Thunder, zag against the Thunder, zag against the Thunder. Yet here we are, one game away, 3 hours away potentially from the Oklahoma City Thunder raising up the Larry O'Brien trophy over their heads and crowning themselves 2025 NBA champions. We're 3 hours away from potentially that moment right now. But can I get one more negative Thunder segment in here, as I've done all season, because I've always wanted to zag against the Thunder here. Now, I don't doubt the Thunder in this spot. Let me get this clear. I don't doubt the Thunder in a game 7. I really don't. We already saw them win a game 7 against Denver. Much different circumstances, much lesser of a team, not for the NBA title, very different circumstances. But the Thunder, we know they can win a game 7. I asked the big question of, did the nervousness of the Thunder or the home and situational advantage of the Pacers play a bigger factor in the result of game 6? Game 6 was a bludgeoning. Okay, game 6, the Thunder, the title was on the line for the Thunder, and the Pacers, meanwhile, the Pacers, their season was on the line in that situation, that circumstance. I wonder if what we saw, that 30-point lead, that 31-point lead for the Pacers, I really wonder if it was a product of the Pacers and facing elimination, having their backs up against the wall, especially being at home in that situation. If it was just a product of that, as we've seen before, I mean, look, last year the Celtics, they were up 3-0 on the Mavs, went into game 4, absolutely smacked. They're on the road, Mavericks backs up against the wall, Celtics, they have another day to live. We've seen that before, even with the Boston Celtics. But did all of that play a factor? Did the home advantage, the situational advantage of elimination play the biggest factor in the Pacers winning game 6 and going up by 31? Or was it the Thunder's nervousness? The Thunder in these playoffs, I highlighted it during the post-game show after we covered game 6 and previewed game 7. Now we're doing another preview here of game 7. This is basically a pregame here of game 7. A lot of moments where the Thunder are teetering on the line of collapse in these playoffs. A lot of moments. You have game 3 in Memphis, game 4 in Memphis. You have game 1 against Denver. You have game 3 against Denver. You have game 6 against Denver. And even in game 5 wasn't the prettiest against Denver. You have game 3 in Minnesota. You have game 1 against Indiana. You have game 6 against Indiana. And even game 3 against Indiana. So all those games, right? The Thunder, they're kind of teetering on the brink of, if these possessions go one way or the other, or rather the other way, and they don't go the Thunder way, the Thunder might not even be in the spot right now. And to me, I do believe we must remind ourselves of the youth involved within the Oklahoma City rotation. 3 of the Thunder's top 6 minutes getters in the NBA Finals are 24 years old or younger. It's Cason Wallace, Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Williams, of course. Those 3 guys, although Jalen Williams, 40-point game in game 5 in this series, that's kind of been it's almost, there's so many comparisons between Jalen Williams and Jaylen Brown. Another comparison is Jalen Williams. He'll have a 40-point night, and then he'll come out with an 8-point night and look a little flustered and look like it's a little bit too much in the moment. Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and Cason Wallace, specifically Wallace and Holmgren. Jalen Williams has been a little bit more productive in this series, but Holmgren and Wallace, Holmgren's been a disaster at times. He's had great defensive stretches, most notably at the end of game 4, that could have saved. Like if we look back at the Thunder season, and if the Thunder win the title, Chet's defense at the end of game 4 has to be mentioned of, oh, that may have saved the season right there. Because if Chet doesn't perform at the end of game 4, the Thunder might not even be in this spot right now. But overall in the series, Chet has not performed up to the standard in which people set for him and which the NBA community sets for him. As for Cason Wallace, not a productive scorer whatsoever, just not really making shots in this series. Not a player expected to make a ton of shots, but just not as productive as you'd like him to be in this series. But this Thunder team, we have to remind ourselves of the youth involved. Okay, they can be, just saying, they are a little young in this spot. This is a big spot, and it's not the game 7 against Denver. It's really not. This is a better opponent, a more fierce opponent, a more confident opponent, a more equipped opponent in the Indiana Pacers, and it's in a spot where if you lose, you don't just lose in the second round. You didn't just repeat what you did the year prior if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder. You're losing in the NBA Finals. You're going out in the NBA Finals. And I'll say this, I think more pressure is applied on the Thunder in this spot tonight than the Pacers, because the Thunder, they they they're a little reminiscent of the 2015-16 Warriors, the record-breaking Warriors, the 73-9 Warriors. Although the Thunder didn't break the record this year for team record, for regular season record, they did win 68. They did win 68 games this season. They were dominant throughout the year, and they were not consensusly, but a lot of people were pointing at the Thunder going, that's the team. That's the team this year. If you looked at the Cavs, the Celtics, the Thunder had the most complete unit. The Cavs had some defensive issues. The Celtics, health, availability, effort, everything, right? With the Celtics going on throughout the season. That didn't make them quite as formidable as last season. But out of the 360-win teams, the Thunder were pinpointed throughout the season as the better of the 60-win teams. I mean, they had the better record throughout the season. They were always 1-2 games above the Cavs, and especially against the Celtics, and in a tougher conference as well, in the Western Conference. But ironically, now the 15-16 Warriors and the 24-25 Thunder, they're in the same spot. Game 7 at home to win the NBA Finals. And here are just some comparisons between these two teams. Both teams dominated in the regular season to an exhausting rate, winning 68 games and winning 73 games. That's an exhausting rate. You have to put in max effort throughout the regular season to get to that point. The conversation is always going to be, do you have that full tank going into the playoffs? If you're exhausting it throughout the regular season to get all those regular season wins into the W category. But both teams didn't, immediately upon reaching the NBA playoffs, both teams didn't look as dominant. Now, you could say, okay, OKC beat Memphis by 51 points in game 1 to start out these playoffs, but after that, where's the dominance been from Oklahoma City? There have been some dominant games mixed in, sure, but otherwise, it's not as if they're consistently dominating. I mean, the first round, they were down 29 points to the Grizzlies. They won game 4 by 2 points. That was a sweep, but it was somewhat of a competitive sweep the last 2 games. Then Denver takes OKC to 7 games. And then in the conference finals, OKC faces maybe a lesser Minnesota opponent. We talked about them. And they faced Golden State without Curry. They faced the Lakers without a center. Were they really as formidable of a conference finals team this year as they were last year? So we have that route for the Thunder, along with the fact here in these NBA finals, we're in game 7. We're in game 7. A lot of people expected this to be a 5, even 6 game series. It could have been the other night, but we're here in game 7. So immediately upon reaching the playoffs, both teams didn't look dominant and didn't look as dominant as they did in the regular season. Furthermore, both teams witnessed a 7th game before reaching the finals. So despite dominating throughout the regular season, 15-16 Warriors, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they take them to game 7 in the 2016 Western Conference Finals. And then this year, the Denver Nuggets take the Oklahoma City Thunder to game 7 in the Western Conference semifinals. So both teams see a game 7 and see an elimination scenario before even reaching the NBA Finals. So there's that comparison as well. Both teams couldn't close out the finals with a lead. Warriors 3-1 lead, and now the Thunder with a 3-2 lead, a little bit different there. But both teams now play game 7 of the NBA Finals at home after owning the perception of the team of destiny and the team supposed to win. That right there along with the youth, is why there's more pressure applied on the Thunder. The Thunder were supposed to be that team that won this series in 5 games, in 6 games potentially. They were supposed to be that 68-win team that we didn't expect them to not be challenged, right? We thought they'd be challenged, the Thunder would be challenged, but it's been a lot harder for them during these playoffs. And we expected the Thunder to see a little bit of an easier time and actually come out with the title, right? That's what the expectation's been for the last month, but 2 rounds. I was going to say 2 rounds, but now it's been over a month since the Cavs collapsed against the Pacers, since the Celtics collapsed against the Knicks. It's been the Thunder. Everybody's been looking at the Thunder as the team to win the title, right? The road, it's one of those, every year the road and the path has to open for the champion. I mean, the champion every year has to see the best path, the most efficient path towards the title. You can't be sustaining injuries. You have to be ultimately playing teams who you never see a finals team just go through an absolute gauntlet. It's usually every single finals team, they see a round or two where they see a round or two in which their path opens up for them, right? Makes it a little bit easier easier of a path. That opened up for Oklahoma City after the Celtics and Cavs were eliminated, because you're facing 2 interim coaches in the first 2 rounds, in the Grizzlies and the Nuggets, and give them both props for what they were able to do at the end of the season. But 2 interim head coaches. Then you're facing the Timberwolves, who are a 6 seed in the conference finals, and they faced the Warriors without Steph Curry and the Lakers without a big in the first round. If they faced an actual opponent like Houston, maybe, or another franchise out there, maybe it would have been a little bit tougher of a time for the Timberwolves. Maybe an opponent like the Nuggets or Clippers, who knows? But you have the path formed for OKC, and even into the finals. Look at the finals. You're facing a 4 seed Pacers team. The path is formed here for Oklahoma City. But that's what applies more pressure on the Thunder tonight for Game 7, is knowing we're that team of destiny. We're that team that's supposed to be here. That path is actually broken to us, or rather for us, and yet we're still here in Game 7 of the NBA Finals at home. And if the Thunder starts slow in this game, the crowd, everybody talks about the OKC crowd as a huge advantage for the Thunder. They could end up becoming a disadvantage for the Thunder, and the crowd, I could see the crowd inverting into a contagious murmur of nervousness. We saw that happen in games 1 and 2 between the Celtics, or at TD Garden. When we saw the Celtics and Knicks face off in the semifinals, we saw in that game too, Celtics, we had a 20-point lead, and now we're down 10. Now we're up 8. Now we're down, the Celtics weren't down. What am I talking about? It's like the Knicks, they're down 8, they're down 10. Oh, they're coming back here. And all of a sudden the crowd, they're actually playing to a disadvantage for the Celtics and for the game, because they're not energetic. They're not into it. They're not confident, right? They're freaking out going, we just saw this in Game 1. It's happening to us again. This could happen again tonight here in the NBA Finals in a different arena across the country in Oklahoma City. It could 100% happen tonight, where the Thunder, they start out slow like they did in Game 7 against Denver. The only thing that's different here about the Denver game 7 and the Indiana Game 7, Denver, one of their best starters in Aaron Gordon, one of the most productive starters, he is hobbled with a hamstring injury. He starts the game out well. OKC starts that game out tight, and then eventually Denver just fell apart because Aaron Gordon couldn't sustain that level of play. Denver didn't have a bench to actually go to, and then the Thunder kill them with their depth and run past the Nuggets. They overcome that 10-point, 11-point deficit early on in the game, and then eventually they run ahead of the Denver Nuggets and beat them by nearly 40. They were up by 43 points in that game, the Thunder were. So you have that circumstance, that Game 7, that data point, but tonight's Game 7, there's no hobbled Aaron Gordon. There's a Pacer bench, right? This is the NBA Finals right here. And I could see the crowd, maybe there's an inversion into a contagious murmur of nervousness tonight, instead of this boisterous, ruckus place that's all for OKC and which has been behind them all season long, and is one of the main talking points for OKC and their potential home court advantage in this spot and in this series. Not only potential home court advantage, they're certified home court advantage. So everybody talks about the home court, but the home court can sometimes play against a team. If the team starts a little tight and then the crowd gets a little tight, there's a lot of work to do for any team out there, and maybe for the Thunder tonight, who knows? But for any team to loosen up a little bit, to loosen up that tightness. That being said, if the Thunder do come through tonight in Game 7, it's one of the better storied runs of a team resiliently overcoming adversity multiple times on their way to a title. I've already kind of briefed it in other lives and this one, but this run right here, and I'm doing it more in a negative sense right now with the Thunder, but let's face it, if they actually come out with this title tonight, this is one of the better storied runs by the Thunder, because you look at their path. Last year's path, people, and every path, people look at, and I was talking about, you have to have a path form for yourself and break for yourself if you actually want to get to the title. It happens every single year. But people sometimes they look at the paths and go, boring, right? The Celtics, they beat the Heat in round 1. They beat the Cavs in round 2, and round 3 they beat the Pacers and then the Mavericks last year. And no Jimmy Butler, no Donovan Mitchell, no Tyrese Halliburton. You face an out of shape Luka in the finals, and the path. It's like, not that interesting, not a lot of drama. Celtics still deserve that title, but didn't really lend itself to a lot of drama, a lot of storylines. Um, Obviously, within Celtics Nation, we can pick a lot out for ourselves, but not to the national media, right? And the national headlines. They didn't that 2024 finals and even Celtics run. There weren't a lot of great stories outside of what the Celtics had already presented in the past, getting there and being competitive to get to that point. That being said, if the Thunder come through tonight, this will be one of the better stories when it comes to any title winning team in NBA history, because the Thunder, they're not supposed to be, they're still very young. They were retooling. I mean, they were rebuilding 3 years ago. In 2023, they made the play-in as the 10 seed. They won the 9-10 playing game. Then they lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a spot in the playoffs. And oddly enough, you look at the standings in 2023. Denver was number 1. Minnesota wound up at number 8, and then OKC, they were 10, but it was Minnesota and OKC for that number 8 spot in the NBA playoffs. Ironically enough, those are the three top seeds in the Western Conference that next season, including Oklahoma City. Who, you look at Oklahoma City, they are a team in which they were a 10 seed 2 seasons ago. Now they've been the 1 seed the last 2 years. They're here a lot earlier than people thought, and just their run in general, their run of overcoming adversity and doing it in a resilient way. And I mentioned them in terms of the negative for the Thunder of what could happen tonight, but let's face it, they overcame that 29-point deficit in Memphis. They won that game down the stretch in Memphis to close out the series and won it by 2 against the Grizzlies, sent them on home, sent them packing. In round 2, they're down 2-1 to the Denver Nuggets. They win game 4 down the stretch. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander saves the Thunder in game 4 down the stretch against the Nuggets. Game 5, they come out. That's not a given game to the Thunder at home. They come out with that one at home in game 5 against Denver. In game 7 against Denver, they win that after going down 11 points in the first 13 minutes of the game. In the conference finals, they lose game 3, and easily in game 4. That was a close game at the end. They pull that one out, and they avoid a 2-2 series. They go up 3-1 in that series and finally close the Timberwolves out in game 5. Then you go to the NBA Finals. The NBA Finals, the Thunder are down 2-1 in the NBA Finals. First off, they have to win that game 2. They do it, dominant fashion essentially, but they have to win that game 2, preserve themselves at home after losing game 1 at home of the NBA Finals. They win game 2. Then all of a sudden they're down 2-1 after being thoroughly outplayed in game 3 on the road. And what happens in game 4? Game 4, they're down 7 going into the fourth quarter, and they're even down 10 in the third quarter. And who saves the day? It's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with his scoring. And then on the other end, Chet Holmgren with his defense. And game 4, whatever happens tonight, game 4, I think a lot of us will look back at game 4 and go, wow, the title could have been won or lost on that night. If the Pacers pull that game out, they're up 3-1 in the series. And that could be a moment where it's like, wow, if the Pacers pulled that game out, they might have lost. The Pacers may have lost the 2025 NBA Finals in game 4 down the stretch. But Shai and Chet, they saved that. And on vice versa, the Thunder may have won the title that night by performing down the stretch, specifically Shai in his scoring role. That game Game 4 was a legendary performance by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a legendary performance by the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then furthermore, you have now going ahead in the series, the Thunder, they win the next two. They win Game 4, they win Game 5. They're up 3-2. So they're down 2-1. Now all of a sudden they're up 3-2. They lose Game 6, as we saw. Now here's the next moment, right? Is this going to be the next moment for the Oklahoma City Thunder? Is this going to be their next resilient moment? If the Thunder come through, again, it's one of the better storied runs in the playoffs in NBA history. And not only in the playoffs, but the regular season as well. 68 wins, very young squad, franchise record in wins. The MVP and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that award goes to him. Now the Thunder winning the Western Conference, getting over that hump. They win the finals time. I mean, it's almost like your triple crown, your perfect trifecta. You got the MVP, you got the number 1 seed, you won the West, you got the regular season win total, and now you got the finals. And it would just be a great run for the Thunder, knowing too they had to overcome a lot of moments of adversity in order to attain that. So that's what's on the line for the Thunder tonight. Regardless, tonight's Game 7 changes the course of NBA history and the direction of both franchises involved. It just does. One game, 48 minutes. It changes the course of NBA history and both franchises. A young Thunder team is immortalized and injected with more confidence and reputation of a champion going into the future. The Thunder win. They're going to own the reputation of a champion. They're going to be injected with more confidence. They're going to be a team that could win multiple titles going ahead into the future. And if they lose, what does that do to them? You know, does it open up the West a little bit? Do the Thunder, do they lose some confidence? Do they actually come back with more confidence and more vengeance next season, as we've seen title teams of the past? Say most notably the San Antonio Spurs. They lose Game 7 in 2013. And what happens? They come back like a rolling freight train in 2014. The Spurs can't come back and they beat the Heat in 5 games that next season. That's their revenge tour. Could that be the same for the Thunder if they lose tonight? If not, they're going to be champions. They're going to be dealing with this. What the Celtics dealt with this past season is trying to go back to back and trying to re-spark the same magic within a different run. So that's what's on the line for the Thunder. As for the Pacers, this may be the Pacers' only chance. They're a 4 seed. They're not necessarily a certified title contending team necessarily. I mean, obviously they're title contenders here, but they're not a team we're necessarily looking at as pure favorites going into the future. You could see OKC making a couple runs. The Pacers, maybe they do turn this momentum into a couple of runs into the future, and maybe it resembles their conference finals and finals appearance. We see teams go on half-decade runs, and sometimes this can be the start of it when you're going to the conference finals, into the finals. Pacers may have certified themselves already as a force into the future with what they have, but there's also a possibility this may be the Pacers' only chance. And it would be one of the biggest underdog champions in NBA history. They would be one of the biggest underdog champions in NBA history. That would be a storyline in itself as well. And the Pacers, talking about the Thunder resiliency, the Pacers are meant for this moment. Both teams are meant for this moment. And that is why I am super excited that we are on the precipice of Game 7 of the 2025 NBA Finals. However, that is going to do it for us here on CTW Live. The game starting in about 1 minute. So time it. 1 minute here, folks. We perfect timing here to end this live stream. However, that is going to do it for us here today on CTW Live. Game 7 starting right now between the Thunder and the Pacers. We will be on here for postgame after the game talking about who won the 2025 NBA title. However, that is going to do it here for us here on CTW Live. Game 7 is upon us, folks, and we're here. We're finally here. But I'll see y'all in 3 hours. We'll see where this conversation goes. We'll see who won the 2025 NBA title. However, that's going to do it for me here today. I am your host, Seamus Zarlingo, and as I always say, thank you all for watching. And of course, go Celtics and go basketball. God bless America.